Hey guys, let us know if you can hear us.
Hi.
Can you guys hear us? Comment on Patreon, letting us know how the sound and video are. We're trying a new computer out, so let us know how that is working out. Let us know where you're watching from.
Yes.
Before we get started.
Can we see who's here? Oh, got
There's
two
a
people
couple
here.
people. Yeah.
Welcome.
We'll get started in just a minute. Allow people to log on and
find the links. We're actually kind of on time this month. We didn't have any terrible tech issues thus far.
And we're having really terrible weather, although it seems to have lightened up a bit. We got some thunderstorm warnings and maybe tornado warnings in other areas. Hopefully not. But hopefully that doesn't affect our stream quality as we continue.
Yeah, just let us know if it seems to go out or something.
Put the headphones on your computer and see if you can hear it on your computer. We got a lot of interesting questions for you this time around.
Yeah, sort of a different thread than usual, which that should be good.
Definitely.
Oh, I guess I have to open it to be able to hear it, huh? And as usual, we'll be doing a giveaway.
Yep.
This month.
So stay tuned to the whole episode so you don't miss the giveaway.
Yes. Pam says she can hear us loud and clear.
Okay,
Liz also does from Northridge.
And make sure you're watching the comments so that we can do follow-up questions. Okay. So any announcements before we get to the rant? We posted a couple new things, a couple games. I just got back from a big 3-day workshop in Boston. And so I've got a lot of game ideas that I want to put out there this next month.
Good.
If I have time, I think June should be a little bit of a lighter month, hopefully. May was nonsense. But hopefully in June I'll post 2 game lessons up, maybe a patterns lessons. I really want to get them up, but it's just been hard to get out. My allergies have been killing me. I can hardly see, and I'm on medication the whole time. So that's been nuts.
And we're doing our first Missouri game day on Sunday, so we're really excited about that.
That should be very fun.
Yeah, probably some of you who are listening today are going to be coming to that, and you may be playing some of the games Michael has been posting already.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can watch those and get an edge up on your fellow competitors.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so any news on the book club? Or
I'm going to be posting tomorrow. I was going to post today, and then I just didn't want to bombard you since we're already doing NAMA today. So I'm going to post tomorrow, and I'm going to do chapters 4 and 5, which will get us quite a bit further through the book. But one of the main things I want to talk about with chapter 4 is search plan. So prep for that. Yeah,
search plan. Is that basically like strategy?
Yeah. It's basically what is your plan going into the search, and then your plan B. And Fred talks about some other things too, like safety checks and things like that.
Very cool. So the rant I want to do today is why I hate the phrase, is it okay? And I get this all the time. Is it okay to feed my dog away from source? Is it okay to
go off leash?
Yeah, go off leash. Is it okay to XYZ, you name it, whatever it is? I hate that phrase. And I understand it's just a way of speaking, but it's not a good question. Think about it. Instead of asking yourself, is it okay to do something? You should really be asking, what's the best way to do something? What's the most effective way to do something? And I like it when my students come to me like, would it be better for me to do X or Y, right? To give me a choice between 2 things, and which one is better? And then we can talk about pros and cons, because there's not going to be one that's always strictly better than another. It's very rare that that's the case.
Right.
Is it okay not to pair? My answer is, yeah, it's okay not to pair. It's okay to do whatever you want with your dog. But what will make your dog more effective in the long run or the short run, or compromise between the two? That's way more important. And
take ownership of what your training decisions are, instead of asking someone else to kind of give you permission with an is it okay? Think through it. And it's definitely
don't ask me for permission. Ask me for information.
Yeah, it's okay and appropriate to ask about your decisions.
Yeah.
But just in a more kind of proactive thinking way, not in a permission kind of sense, because you're allowed to do kind of almost anything most of the time.
Yeah.
Unless it's like against the rules of our game or something.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So think about that when you're phrasing your own questions, because I really believe that words indicate your internal state, the way you feel and think about things. So when you're asking questions, really think about how you word those questions. And what are you really asking? Are you asking if it's permissible? Or are you asking if you can get away with it? Are you asking if it's the best thing that you and your dog can do in the moment? Right? So
yeah,
that's an idea for you to think about.
And also sometimes people have like maybe a physical injury or some reason why they're asking, but that's not clear to us and is it okay? Like if your back really hurts today and you want to do something different because of that, giving us that info would be a better way to go about it.
Yeah.
And the more info we have about like why you're asking things, the better info we can give to your specific question. Because if you ask it versus the person next to you asks it, it might be a completely different answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's get straight into questions. We got a lot of them. As always, if you have follow-up questions or you want to throw a new question into the mix, we will post them on Patreon. That's where we're checking. If you post on YouTube, we won't see it till later. If you post on Facebook, we won't see it till later. So Patreon's the place to go to get your questions answered. We will go for about an hour. We usually go a little bit over. If we have more questions than we can answer, then go to next month's NAMA queue. Of course, all of our $5 patrons and above get priority. So your questions will be answered. If we have to choose between two, if you've gone 5 or higher, you're going to be chosen over everyone else. So first,
read the first question.
Yeah, first question.
All right. Often in NEC SW, the team moves from one element straight to another. Do you have general suggestions on how to keep your dog in a good mental state for the next search?
That's a good question. I remember one time we did a game day where we did 2 find as many as you can searches that in a row, and the doorway exiting the first search was the entry into the second search. And I would say at least 60-70% of the dogs went through that door like they thought they were going to head back to the car and just quit.
And wasn't it from an interior to an
exterior? Yeah, it was from an interior to an exterior. Yeah, it was a vehicle, I think. It was at Knights of Columbus in Palmdale, you remember, yeah. So what I advise a lot of people there is to, even though the searches are back-to-back, repeat your start line ritual at the new start line. So that means at the end of that search, a lot of people just opened the door and went to the next search. Take off the collar, pause, put on the collar, get your treats ready, fix your leash, search. Give that ritual a second time to help the dog know beginning of search, right? And let them know when the search ends as well. Take off that collar if you have a search collar on. Let the dog know when the search is over, when the search is beginning. Keep in mind that even when you're approaching a search, I did a game at the workshops I did this weekend, and the dogs were giving a lot of information up to the start line, and I was asking people to pay attention to that. So even though you might be off, you're not on duty, that doesn't mean you should stop paying attention. You should always be paying attention, but having that clear ritual of now a search begins can really help the dog know if you're going back to back several searches in a row that they have to stay focused.
I would maybe, and depending on the dog too, but I would do it slightly differently, especially because I really don't like to put my collar on right at the start line. I like to have it done at least 10 or 15 feet back, usually where the judge is talking to me or the final staging area, so that I can completely focus on my dog. And if I see them catch odor, I don't have to distract them again with putting the collar on. So I like to be totally prepared coming up. I'm not going to hang out in the staging area with the collar on, but I'm going to be ready walking up to the start line. And then if I do have a back-to-back search, especially if it's very close, I may not fully take off the collar because I might be closer than I want to be for putting it back on. But I will do a totally new start routine where I prep my leash, I prep the food in my hand, I take the loop of my dog's collar, set them up. And so I do try to make it as obvious as possible, but I don't always do the collar removal aspect.
And I think part of it just depends on how back-to-back the searches are. Because if they were like our game day where it's literally the end of the last search is the beginning of the next search, that's different. Just like a segmented search is sort of similar. And some people try to make it very fluid where it doesn't even feel like it's segmented. And some people ritualistically stop and start between segments. You need to know your dog and your team and what works best for you. My other piece of advice would be to practice these things ahead of time and don't just wait for them to happen to you at a trial. Think about what different strategy you have available to you and practice them at class or at mock trials so you can see what actually is the best fit for you and your dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like our students asked us years and years ago about, how do we get, putting on and off the collar or whatever equipment you're using can feel kind of cumbersome, but that's a skill to practice just like anything else so that it doesn't take you 5 minutes to get your surge equipment on before a trial. And so there are a lot of things that you should be practicing, especially if it's not easy for you. But you can even stop and start within a search.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do that all the time.
And put the dog on and off leash. And sometimes they think the search is ending.
Yeah, that's a good exercise to do if you haven't done it before, is randomly put the dog on and off at intervals throughout your search so the dog doesn't assume putting the leash on means we're done.
Yeah.
Or taking the leash off means go crazy or whatever else it might mean.
I took Icy to an elite coaching group day a couple months ago, and we were doing 3 back-to-back searches with high elevation hides, and it was very windy. And Icy tends to get more and more ramped up as she searches, and she had spent quite a long time working in this high hide. It was pretty challenging for her because of the wind, and she got it. And then we were supposed to move on and let the dog kind of just take us to the next search area. And she took me, and I thought right before we got there, I really should stop her and let her calm down a moment and think before we continue. But I was sort of not fully thinking and following instructions, and so we just let her go. And then about 2 minutes into the search, when she's not making any progress, the instructor said, I thought before she entered, we really should stop her and let her calm down for a second. Mm-hmm. And so we both had the same thought, just neither of us had kind of made it happen. And so for a dog like that, a second to calm down in between things can be really worthwhile. So it's like a segmented search. If I had one in a trial with her, I would probably almost certainly take the time to do that every time. Just get her head back.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so...
And there was a second part to that question. Did you want me to...
Oh, yeah, go ahead and read it.
What do you think is... Or I think this is the same question asker. What do you think is the most important characteristic a dog needs to possess to be successful in nose work long term? And we've answered this before in NAMA.
Yeah, well, but I don't know. Not exactly.
Similar questions.
The most important characteristic a dog needs to possess to be successful in nose work long term is different than just in general.
Sure.
Long term, one thing that I would say is they need a handler who's willing to revisit their foundation. So a lot of times if people just fly through the levels, and then when they meet struggle and they don't know how not to just keep moving forward, they don't know how to go back and do foundation again, a lot of times handlers and dogs burn out. Yeah. So having a handler that can motivate during those bad portions.
Because you're always going to have the plateaus and the drops before you come up again.
Yeah. And never think you're past going back to your foundation. Never be negative about it. Oh, I have to go back and do this. No, it should be kind of exciting to go back to do your foundation.
Pro basketball players practice their foundation, every practice time. It's super important.
Yeah. Another thing that's worth mentioning, although this isn't something people are going to want to hear, is have a young dog. Young dogs last longer than old dogs. If you started with an older dog, they're only going to last a certain amount of time. Age is a factor. Age is a crucial factor.
Yeah. I mean, I think dogs really hit, like if you start a dog kind of young, I think they really hit their prime between like 5 and 8 or 9, probably depending on the dog. And so if you're starting at 10 or 11, because it's your retirement sport, like it's good that you're doing it, but you're not going to have that longevity or that vitality and energy that a younger dog or a dog in its prime has. And then also, like, I definitely agree with Michael that like revisiting foundation is like baseline important, but I think there are small things that are incredibly important, like keeping your dog really fit. Yeah,
I was going to say that next, which is start conditioning early and maintain it throughout the life of the dog. Don't wait for your dog to slow down to start doing your conditioning work. Condition them now. Even though nose work doesn't seem to be an athletic sport like agility and other sports like that, it is. And it requires a lot of stamina from the dogs. It requires endurance. It requires being able to cope with a variety of climates and temperatures.
Especially when it's not great weather. If it's colder or hotter, if your dog, the better condition your dog is in and the fitter, and thinner they are, the better they're going to handle those temperature differences.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be able to like tell you about where odor is a lot better if they're in good shape than if they can't lift up or move well or whatever it is.
Another thing that is probably a good thing to mention is identify what the dog's most powerful reinforcer is as early as possible and use it. A lot of people make it by using a medium value reinforcer.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's high value because it's high value enough for training. But really figure out, is there a higher value reinforcer than what I'm using? And check that periodically, because if you go a year of training on hot dogs, that hot dog might have lost some of its excitement by the end of that year.
Yeah, I mean, you
change
see,
it up.
if you, like, for some reason, switch up treats, like, within a class,
Yeah,
you'll see dogs, like, so excited about things that you would say are way lower value than what you have, but they're different and they're new.
Yeah.
And so I think it's worth, at least some of the time having several different things you can switch between in a given session, and then switching, between different weeks, and keep it interesting for sure.
And, we just posted that last lesson for Catfish starting his foundation out, and we changed up treats on him and he was a different dog. So, and I thought I was using something pretty high value, but not according to him. So,
and not when we went from inside to a field where, the environment is going to be a lot harder to overcome for him.
Another thing, if your goal is to be in nose work for a long term, don't over trial. Space your trials out a little bit. Make them count. Make them important.
Recover and improve. Trials.
Don't try to cram everything in all early on in the dog's training. Spend enough time on the foundation that you go in and you know what you're getting into. You're going to just win everything. And
you're going to be confident, and you're going, I mean, we like to go to win. That's not everybody's thing.
Sure.
But going in to just barely squeak by is not usually good for you or your dog, because you're not going to have the confidence to go in and call alert when you need to and all those kind of things. And I also think, going to mock trials and stuff can be an excellent complement to trialing, in a way that supports you and your dog instead of detracting from your training.
Yeah. A lot of people who compete are competing with the bare minimum of what's required to compete. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of longevity, having things on a more planned out schedule about when do you expect to have your NW1? When do you expect to have your NW2?
Yeah, and we know that it can be really hard to get into trials. And so that can make people want to just enter whatever they can and hope they get in. But sometimes you have to decide if it's really the right time. For example, Icy got her NW3 Elite last May, so just over a year ago. And she got into an Elite trial in July, a couple months later. And I could have gone and had fun, and we both would have had a blast. And it was multifaceted that I decided not to. It was partially because we were saving money to move, but it was also in large part because I had really been focusing on NW3 skills with her. And I had not focused on things that I know from doing Elite for several years with Hazel that she's going to need that are different from NW3 for her to really do well. And so instead of a trial where she and I just go and have fun, which we can do a lot of different ways, I wanted to prepare her so that we can go and really do the best we can at an Elite trial.
Yeah. So now, before we switch to our next question, just welcome to whoever's tuned in. Let us know where you're watching from. Comment on Patreon. If you want us to see it soon, if you have any questions for us and you want us to clarify something in our answers, let us know. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay.
All right. You want to read the second question?
Yeah. Okay. So, in class, we did the same exercise twice. The first time, 2.5 minutes. The second time, 5 minutes. There are 14 hides. I chose to keep her on leash the first time, and she only covered about a third of the space, and she found 4 out of the 14 hides. Second run, I let her go off leash. It covered the entire space and found 3 hides. Even with twice the amount of time, the large area in the large area, is it more advantageous to keep them on leash? When she's on leash, does it slow her down enough to stick to a problem and work it rather than rushing off to another one? So that's a great question.
It is, but real quick before you answer it, Linda had posted that our speech was really garbled. So if that is still the case, or if it's the case for anybody else, please let us know, because it seems like it's running okay on our end.
Yeah.
So just let us know.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. So to boil down the question to something a little bit more concise, in larger areas especially, is it better to go on leash or off leash? Which is going to be the most effective? And I think it can be either. It depends on the dog and the handler. I also think there are some strategies you should try out. A lot of times what happens is when you go off leash, the handler becomes way more passive than they should. So one of the rules of thumb that people give in nose work is when you're off leash, handle like you're on leash. And when you're on leash, handle like you're off leash.
Yeah.
So see if that might make a difference. Go off leash, but handle the dog as if you had a leash attached to you and work your area.
Yeah, make progress around the search area. I see a lot of people just sort of stay in one corner.
Yeah.
And it keeps drawing the dog back and back and back to them. And so the dog, you may be able to see from the outside, the dog's trying to make progress into the search area, but because of the lack of support and movement from the handler, they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally do work. I work a lot off leash, but I think for most teams, it's better to go on. I think as long as you keep moving, you move through that area.
You actively work on your leash handling skills.
Absolutely. Going on leash can keep a dog a little bit more focused in terms of a competitive setting. I've built a relationship with my dog so that I can work a pattern pretty strongly off leash.
And some people find that they actually can better off leash because they're utilizing their body language appropriately instead of relying on the leash to try to control the dog.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Linda still can't hear.
But other people can hear it.
Yeah. So she switched to YouTube and she's fine.
Okay.
Good.
So yeah, maybe if you're having sound trouble and you're watching it through Patreon, maybe switch to YouTube. Okay. So make sure to cover ground and only stick to areas that your dog wants to stick to. Your dog wants to stick to an area, let them stick there. Help them, and then once they've sorted a problem or not, then move to the next area. That's the most important strategy. Whether you do that on or off leash shouldn't matter. If you let the dog off leash and they run around unfocused, that's a whole separate issue. That's a odor obedience problem. That's a hunch ride problem. That's a patterns problem.
Yeah, and
that's all training.
Your dog is catching a hide and then moving on to work easier hides. That's also a training issue where you're probably training too many multiple hide searches without doing complex single hide searches that they just stick to the problem and work it out.
Yeah. So it's always important to try to parcel out what things are training issues that I should fix in my regular training and what things are handling issues that I should fix by handling better. And don't try to fix training problems with handling solutions. I see it happen all the time. They miss a hide in the corner, so what do? They start handling by pushing the dog into the corner. No, if your dog misses the corner, set more corner hides so the dog goes in the corner on their own.
Yeah.
The handling should come as a support to what training your dog already has, not to make up for your dog's training holes.
Yeah, and when you are handling in a trial, make sure that you are supporting the dog, not taking over and trying to handle the space for them, because then you're going to take them to an area and they're not going to be able to work the hide because you're going to be moving on and doing something else or having them recover the same area 10 times.
Yeah.
You really have to be careful not to let the search become your search instead of your dog's search.
Absolutely. I spent a lot of time talking to people about this in my workshops this weekend. It was very hard for them to not either become completely passive or completely take the lead over from the dog, especially when we start working on things like patterns. People want to just take the lead from the dog. That's not what patterns are about. Patterns are about teaching the dog how to take you into areas and how you not to get in the way. Right, because I believe the dog will cover the area on their own, especially if you train them. And it's us that get in the way that prevents the dog from doing a natural pattern.
Yeah, and if you have a hard time with this concept, work with a coach who can give you info in the moment and point out when you're holding back or being too fast, too much movement, if you're, blocking the dog or pushing them or whatever it is, so that they can help you get a feel for that in the moment. And then also, I really believe that video review where you can see yourself, what you were doing, that helps your brain connect it to your movement. And I see people make a lot of progress when they actually spend time watching themselves do it on video.
Mm-hmm.
You ready for the next question?
Next question. So the next question is essentially, I'm gonna paraphrase it. She's having a problem with her dog that when it works a single hide problem, it takes you longer to find it than if there are 3 hides, and that she mostly works with single hides. So why is her dog taking longer in single hide problems than in multiple hide problems? There are lots of potential answers to this question. The first is that maybe the punishment of being put away is overriding the value of the odor. So the dog, when they're in a single odor problem, is like avoiding the odor to a certain extent because they know once they find it, they get put away. So the answer to that is severalfold. One is find a better reinforcer and pay it more.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to offset the punishment of being put away. I don't care how much your dog likes this crate, doesn't like it more than working.
Hopefully.
Okay, yeah, and if it does, that's a whole separate problem. The second thing is, on single hide problems, don't always put the dog away after finding the hide. Reward them a bunch and let them keep searching, right? There's nothing wrong with searching blank areas like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great thing. Let the dog hunt. Let them know that they're not going to be put away just because they found it.
I think also sometimes the dog comes out and they catch 3 odors at once, and it's just really exciting.
Exactly.
And so that can speed them up just because they're more excited and engaged with the problem.
Yeah. Another thing that's worth mentioning is statistically, if I've got a room with more hides, what that means is that there are more areas that are correct, right? So if I have 1 hide in the search area, that means the rest of the search area is wrong and only 1 area is right.
Mm-hmm.
If I add 2 hides, twice as many areas are correct. 3 hides, 3 times as many areas are correct, right? So it may not be that the dog's finding them faster. It's just there's there's less area that's wrong in the search area.
You have to test out with hides like close to the threshold,
and
in different places to figure out, exactly what's going on with time. But I've definitely seen that with my own dogs where we come into a search and there are 3 or 5 hides and we just knock them out like that. And sometimes it's the way the hides are set, and sometimes I think it is just the excitement. It's also really reinforcing to the handler to find more hides. Mm-hmm. So that probably comes into play to some extent as well. Yeah.
Next question.
Sure.
As always, if you want clarifications to our answers, let us know in the comments.
Yes. All right, I'll read this one. How do you deal with blank rooms? Everyone says not to practice them, but then how do you read the dog and not force a false?
Yeah, there's a lot of funny.
I also don't know who everyone is.
Yeah, it's definitely not everyone.
There are some people who definitely say not to practice blank rooms, but I know a lot of people
who say the opposite.
Yeah,
you should practice them as much as you can. Blank rooms, if you do them right, are very motivating to the dog. They're very exciting. They allow the dog to really understand how to work an unproductive area. I personally you don't have to do anything special to a blank room. You just do them. Just send the dog out to search. The one thing that's important is don't tell your dog it's a blank room. Don't have body language that says it's blank. Don't worry.
I don't have to do anything. I'm not going with you.
So a lot of people, when I tell them they're going to work a blank search, they come in without their treat pouch and stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah. So you're telling your dog it's blank. You don't have food in your hand. You're not ready. You shouldn't be that trusting anyways. What if I actually put a hide and told you it was blank, right?
Yeah, when we went, one of the times we went and did a private with Fred Helfers, he told me he was setting a blank room and he had Michael run it first and Michael ran it as a blank. And then he had me run it, and about 30 seconds in, my dog cuts into the center and alerts on a table, and it took me a minute of going, really? Did Fred just do this to me? But yeah, absolutely. You want to be prepared. And if you're going into like an NW3, you don't know whether or not any of those searches are blank, and you need to treat them like they're all the same.
Yes. Yeah.
Same with like search equipment, leash, everything needs to be the same. And the way you handle, you need to still act like, and I act more like it's blank when it's not than that it's not when it is. But either way, you need to search the same.
Absolutely. So now, as to how do you deal with them, like in a trial, you deal with them with like any other search area. You cover your search area. You do your pattern, cover every area, and then you call finish. Just like in any search area, blank or not, you don't want to stay in any area longer than necessary. You don't want to force your dog into falsing. One pass to a second pass the opposite direction, absolutely no more than that. I will tend to do one pass. I will know when I make that first pass if there's an area that's worth double checking. My dog will tell me. But in general, my dog makes that pattern. They don't show any interest in the room. It means there's no odor in the room. And if there was an odor that we missed, we need to go home and train it, right? It's not I should go do 3 more passes to make my dog get it. It's I need to figure out how do I make my dog more independent, more focused on odor so that she'll get it on the first pass, or at least catch it on the first pass so that I could help him.
And what I definitely don't want is that I work a blank room to death. So my dog says, I need to just give up in blank rooms because they're going to go on forever and I'm not going to find anything. I'm not going to get rewarded. Because for one thing, there might be a hard enough hide that my dog initially thinks it is blank, and then they need to work a little harder and get it. So I want my dog to be encouraged to work harder, not less hard. And the way I know when a room is blank is I search it. I go, and I usually do one direction one way, one direction the other way. The first direction, they don't get anything. So I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is blank. We go the other direction, and they are searching twice as hard because they're like, I didn't get anything the first time. There should be something here. I'm going to work as hard as I can. So they're going deeper and higher and more intensely. And to me, it's usually extremely clear that it's blank because they're working so hard. And if there was something there, they would have found it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to have to second guess them and say, are you sure there's not something here? Yeah. But I want to treat all my search areas like I'm clearing the space. And then if we find something, yay, but not just like, where's the hide, where's the hide, where's the hide all the time.
Keep in mind that you should be exposing yourself to blank room concepts as early as possible. You're going to need it for your ORT. The idea that there's one box that has odor in it and 11 that are blank, those are 11 blank searches. You need to be able to read that, and your dog needs to know what to do when there's no odor there. They need to know that they need to go on and find odor in another box or something like that. Also keep in mind that your dog was doing blank searches for years before you did nose work, right? It's not something new. It's just that you're thinking about these areas in a new way.
And people get really worried about their dog not getting like paid at the end of a search. Yeah. But if you look at dogs hunting, they are, tearing after things and not catching them. And it's still extremely reinforcing to them. And hunting for odor should be extremely self-reinforcing, even if they're not getting that cookie on the hide at the end.
Absolutely.
And one way that we often do it with sort of beginner dogs is that they search blank for a bit, and then we toss out a hide kind of on their way out. So they go, I worked really hard, and I worked just a little harder, and I got something, instead of I worked a little harder, and now I'm going to give up and be done. And I definitely don't like the concept that a lot of people like, which is my dog walks in and doesn't want to search. And so that's how I know there's nothing there. Yeah. Because I have set searches for people where there was a hide that's in the back blowing up a corner, and they're not going to catch it until they're, right on 8/10 of the way there. So they're not going to get it from the door. And so if your dog gives up at the door, you're just setting yourself up for failure at higher levels.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't ever want to reward my dog for quitting. I don't think it's a good thing. Yeah.
And you just have to have the guts to call finish instead of saying, I'm going to search this to death just because my dog can.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. This is a great question, especially if you're new to the sport. Can you explain the functions of trial officials like CO and judges in any of their official trial position? So I'll speak for NEC SW, and then I'll let Natalie speak for USCSS and AKC because she knows more about that. But so at a trial, the CO, certifying official, that person's job is to set the search areas, set the hides. It's their job to manage all the odor, things that have to do with odor. It's also their job to write out incident reports if someone gets injured or something like that in relationship to the host. So if you have a really bad hide, it's our fault. It's CO's fault, right? Theoretically. Or it's the weather's fault and the weather did something weird. The next person is going to be the host. The host's job is to acquire location, to do all the registration.
Dealing with insurance and competitors and bringing in all that stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pressure on hosts and on COs. Make sure you thank them for all the hard work and stuff that they put into it. The host and the CO
taking on the financial risk.
Yeah, and the host and the CO tend to work directly with each other, and they're kind of the two head honchos of everything.
Of the trial day. Yeah.
Then on the official side, that you've got your judges. Their job is to say yes and no, to give out
And
faults as
odor.
necessary. Yeah, well, hopefully. They will be the direct interactor with you at a trial.
They're the one you're saying alert to.
Yeah. And they don't have anything to do with the setting of odor. They are in charge of how they make their calls. Of course, they can cooperate with the CO and talk about it, but in general, we rely on the judge's expertise to know when to make an adjustment to a call and when to not make an adjustment.
And at this point in NECSW, basically all judges are professional detection handlers or trainers or whatever. So they all come from
They wanted
that
to set
background.
up a high bar for that. And then on the other side of things, there's also the volunteer coordinator and the score room. And those should also be mentioned because they're more behind the scenes. But the volunteer coordinator coordinates all your volunteers, assigns all the assignments, runs around as a lackey often for the CO and the host.
Just make things run smoothly. Yeah. They work together with the host on the flow, getting you to and from your searches.
Yeah. And then there's a score room lead as well, who they have a special certification through the NECSW to run score room, and they are in charge of all the scores, making sure everything makes sense, double checking videos and things like that.
I'm a score room lead. We often have to take score sheets back to the judges because they forgot to mark off little things. There are a bunch of different things they have to mark. We have to double check all the scores, make sure nothing got entered incorrectly. And
they're sworn to secrecy.
Yeah. What happens in the score room stays in the score room.
Yeah.
And then, we're the ones who kind of get the ribbons ready and then get those scores out as quickly as possible to the CO so that you can have your ribbon ceremony, award ceremony as quickly as possible at the end of the day.
Is there anyone I'm missing for NEC SW Trials? I think that's basically everyone.
It.
Occasionally, you'll have a supervising CO supervising an apprentice CO. Who's in training. But in that case, either one of them may or may not be setting the hides, depending on what stage of training they're in. But, I can't give too much information about that. Yeah. So why don't you talk about USCSS and
Okay,
AKC?
so USCSS, you have the certified search designer, who's basically the same role as the CO. They're picking search areas, setting hides, kind of figuring out what your stuff is going to be for that day. And then you have a judge. Basically, they do the same thing as an NECSW judge, but they don't necessarily come from a professional detection background. They often come from more of a nose work background, where they're instructors or they've gone through the judge's certification program through USCSS. And although certainly some of them are professional detection people as well. And I think that, and there's a score room person also.
And a host.
And a host, of course, yeah. So very similar
to
NECSW. And then in AKC, you don't have a certifying official and judge as two separate roles. You have a judge who they do both. So if you're offering, and the way AKC trials work in general is quite a bit different, but say I'm assigned to be the judge for novice interior and novice exterior today. So, they'll have decided what order those are running in, or if they're kind of running at the same time. And I, as the judge, would choose my search area, set the boundaries, make sure they're the right size and all the different parameters that they have for searches, and then pick where the hides are going to be. And then they have an odor handler who puts the odor in the actual scent vessel and then sets that where it's going to be. So there's kind of only one person for the trial who it handles odor, even though there may be, 4 or 5 different judges, depending on how big of a trial it is. And then I, as a judge, watch a demo dog run, which is like a dog in white, basically. And then I'm the one that says yes or no.
For those who don't know what a dog in white is, it's a dog who runs all the hides before competitors run it to test to make sure the odor is available, that it's working the way the CO wanted, or if there are any adjustments that need to be made.
Yeah. And then I, as a judge, would be the one, in the search for every dog and saying yes or no. And then they also have to sign off on the scores at the end of the day. So they're a little bit involved in that, the double checking of score room at the end of the day too. Is that it?
I think that sounds like basically it.
Yeah, I mean, there are other people in your searches too, but they aren't officials. You have like the timer and videographer and judge's steward.
Yeah.
Those are all NEC SW roles, and they may or may not have versions of those at the other ones. Sometimes, if there aren't enough volunteers at USCSS or AKC, the judge will do their own timing, and they may not have a judge. And in AKC, the judge is their own judge steward. They are the one who greets a competitor and tells them what the parameters of the search are and when they can start running.
Okay, so next question. This dog is nervous or / afraid to indicate high hides. Her instructor thinks it may have that she may have scared the dog off of climbing up stuff, and now he won't indicate on hides way above his head. Any ideas on how to work through this? This is definitely something I've seen before. It's not an uncommon problem for a dog to have been taught not to jump on counters and look high for things. We can punish them intentionally or unintentionally, and that will affect their nosework searching. One of the most important things to solve this is, one, emphasize less obedience at home and emphasize more management. Instead of punishing your dog for jumping on counters, don't put food on counters so the dog can jump up there and learn it doesn't pay. So at least you're not punishing it. The next thing is to make a clear differentiation from being a regular dog and being a nosework dog. That's a change of equipment. Put on something that lets them know they're allowed to break all of their normal rules.
And then don't get upset with them if they do things that they wouldn't normally be allowed to do. Like we'll tell people, no obedience in nosework. Yeah. The dog goes to jump on something, they say, or even when they go over to people. Don't worry about that stuff. Yeah. Let the dog do their job. And if they are unfocused, then that's a different problem to work on. But it's not, an obedience problem when you're in nosework.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing is start working progressively. That's the easiest way to do it is set hides here, then here, then here, then here, then here as the dog goes. You may find a barrier, like the dog does it here, but then here he won't do it. And then you just have to keep going back and forth until the dog does it. The second thing is increase the motivation. Put something really special up there. Make the dog a little hungrier. Let him go, skip breakfast and let him get dinner off of a higher surface, right? Push him out of his comfort zone. Make him really want it and see if that doesn't get him to do it. Another thing is outside of nosework, train him intentionally to jump up on higher things. So, train him to do an A-frame for agility. We have lots of the plastic, pet crates type things. Train the dog to jump on that, right? Train the dog to jump up on a table, a picnic bench at the park or something like that. As a trick, right? Not nosework. Use a lure him up there. Tell him it's okay. Let him know that he can break these rules under specific circumstances.
Yeah. And I know this dog. I've worked with him in person, and I wasn't there when this instructor was giving this advice. And I know that this dog does do doggy parkour and different things. So it's not like he isn't ever jumping up on things. So I don't know what happened in this specific instance, but I saw him do a little bit of an elevated hide, maybe about 3 feet or so up the other day. I had set up a table on its side and the hide was at the top of the table. And then I had sort of a staircase that the dogs could climb up to get to it. And he figured out where it was and he kind of did a pause and then kind of moved on like, I can't get to that. And then when his handler gave him just a little bit of permission, he went, and it just hopped right up and went to it. So some of it is that like knowing that they're allowed in that context to get up to it, but then also thinking that that's even an option. I don't think that it occurred to him that he could possibly get up to it in this situation. And so that is, like Michael's saying, set things where that's part of what you're doing, setting progressive things, pairing them, making, even when it's elevated, if you've made a way for them to get to it, pair it so that they have that extra motivation and they get paid when they, right when they get all the way up to it. And I see a lot of people go, they can't quite get to it. I'm just going to pay them early. And then the dog's like, well, why put out the extra effort if I don't have to? If I can just go, it's there and get paid for it. And I was actually talking about a similar thing with another judge yesterday or Monday about how dogs can create some weird ideas about high elevation. And one of the ways to deal with that and not get a lot of like guessing or them being not really sure what's going on with the odor is to set things up where maybe it is really high, but there is a way for them to get up to it. And so they can work the odor problem on the ground, and they can get a strong idea of what that means and what it looks like, but then they can get all the way up to it and get confirmation that they were right and know exactly where it was. And that can give them a much more confident understanding when they're working a hide they can't get all the way up to.
The easiest way to do that is to train on a slope. The steeper, the better. You can start the dog down here, but set a hide up here. And from down here, the odor will act as if it's 10 feet in the air. Mm-hmm. But as the dog moves up the slope, they'll get to it and it'll be right at ground level or just above it or something like that. That's the easiest way to do it. The second way would be to stack things up that the dog can climb on that are safe.
We used to do it at in our garage in Pear Blossom. We had hay bales in there, and they were kind of a nice little staircase at one point.
A little pyramid.
Yeah, and so I set a hide on the ceiling, and the dogs could get all the way up to it, and they did. I wasn't going to pay them until they got up to it, and not that they even asked to be. But that can be an extra kind of safe way to do it with something like hay bales. But at Georgia camp once, I wanted to set a little higher elevation, but I wanted the dogs to be able to source it. And there was this great little wooden building with a bench all the way down. And so I set it. It was probably about between 5 and 6 feet in the air. And so they worked it, like that's how high it was, and then hopped up on the bench, and then they could source it no problem. Even the shortest of the dogs could source it from the bench. Yeah. Some of them, we had to help them get up on the bench because we didn't have a way to make an additional staircase, but they were all able to source it. And I think that's really important. And then you can do high hides, which people love to do, without creating the issues of dogs not sourcing.
Yeah, of inaccessible hides, because a high hide doesn't have to be inaccessible. And you should avoid it being inaccessible if you can, for the same reasons why you avoid normal inaccessible hides. They cause fringing. Another thing that's always worth mentioning is that rule out medical issues, rule out things like that. If your dog's not going high, maybe it's because it hurts them to put all their weight on their back end, right?
Yeah, or if they maybe would jump up, but they won't indicate high, maybe it's a neck thing. Yeah. And so it could look like they're avoiding it because they go, oh, that's not quite so comfortable.
Yeah, and don't put your dog in situations where they're super uncomfortable, Figure out a way to work around that, figure out how to make them more comfortable, but also rule out all the possible reasons they might be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And for some dogs, it's really just, the exposure or lack of exposure that they've had has just created, they think that it's a good alert and they're not sure why you aren't taking it.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I'd like to welcome all of our viewers. We're almost wrapping up here. We got one more question. If you need any questions answered, if you have a follow-up question to the answers that we're giving, make sure that you comment on Patreon. That's where we're going to see it first. Comment on YouTube. We'll see it eventually. Comment on Facebook. We might see it eventually. But Patreon's the quickest way to access us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So,
and we do have our giveaway coming up at the end of the last question. So be ready for that.
Make sure you're watching to get the giveaway.
Because you'll have to be ready to post really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question. This dog just participated in an AKC Advanced Scent Work Trial.
Which is the second level up, so there are 2 hides in each search.
She did very well with 6 first places and 1 second place. Congratulations. You should be very proud. In one of the exterior searches, she was the only dog that passed. Extra special. But we blew 1 interior alert, so did not earn a title. Bummer. This was her second AKC trial put on by the same club, so I'm not sure how other clubs would do it. The searches were so boring. This is in all caps. Not sure if it was because the AKC set so many rules, like time distance between containers, sizes of search areas, etc., or what. Do you think it's possible for the dog to get bored with the searches too? I personally think that dogs don't get bored. They get bored of their reinforcer. So if they want what you have to offer, they'll never get bored of doing things to get that. They'll happily repeat that thing over and over again, provided they want what you're giving them.
Although containers can get really boring, even if you're...
No, I don't think they do. I really don't think they do. I think the reward gets boring. They get bored of the reward, not the activity. I also think that the handler's attitude can affect the dog. So if you get bored, then your dog will lose motivation. But it's not because they're bored. They're just feeding off of your energy. So maybe those 2 things. Now, is it possible for a dog to get bored? Yeah, I think it's possible. I just don't think it happens. It's like saying, is it possible for a dog to be truly stubborn? I think it's possible. I just think it's so rare. In general, what most people say is a stubborn dog is just a dog who needs more training. Who needs better motivation. And I think it's the same for a dog who's bored.
In her post, in her question, I think she was bored. She says the searches were so boring.
Yeah.
That may have been just her saying she was bored, not necessarily even that her dog was bored.
Absolutely. Sure.
And, as an AKC judge, I will say that there are some pretty strict requirements on what the judge can set in terms of size, especially at the lower levels of the number of containers you can use, the sizes of the search area. And so you will probably see at the lower levels quite a bit of similarity between trials. Although I would say that's probably more the requirements and the judges, not necessarily so much the club, because the club's not the one setting the searches. There's a lot more variation at the higher levels as the judge is allowed to do more. But I also think that the odor in AKC is really gigantic. And so the dogs aren't having to go out and hunt for the odor. Most of the time, they're catching it from the start line and just sourcing it, or walking around and running into it, because it's a really, really large amount of odor. And especially if you're practicing for that a lot, which I don't think this person who asked the question is, but if you are, the dog can kind of, I think, lose some of their desire and drive to just really go out and hunt for it, because there's just not that much work they have to do for it. And so if that's the case, then I think you need to find ways to set things so that the dog retains their desire to really go out and hunt.
Yeah. I think another thing that's worth mentioning is you got all these first places and second places and that kind of thing. I'm a very competitive person. And one thing that I find boring is that a lot of people don't take nose work to be super competitive. So I'm able to get first places with a older, slow husky, right? She's like 11 years old and she still can place in searches. And it does somewhat bore me that my competitors are not stepping up with their young, great dogs and taking some risks out there. They want to play it safe. They want to get that title. And that can make things boring for me, which could affect my dog. Yeah,
if you're having to strive to win and place, that's going
to
way
more
mean
exciting.
A lot more to you than like, oh, yeah, we get first every time.
So it may be that you're competing at such a much lower level. It's just so easy for you that you're not challenged. So it's not so much that it's boring. It's that you're not challenged.
Yeah,
now, throw in a few competitors at the same skill level as you at that level, and things might change.
Yeah, because you're also, not with this dog, but you're also trialing an elite dog. And so, you've obviously been through all of this for quite a while. But I do think, you're in the second level. I think as you get up to the higher levels, that it will be a lot more interesting for you.
Yep.
I remember I'd been trialing Hazel in, I think she'd been in elite for a few months or something at this point. And she'd been, she'd done it. It took us a while to get NW3. So we'd been doing, bigger searches for a long time. And we went into level 1 element interior trial. And she found the first hide in about 5 seconds. And I was like, all right, let's go. And she was like, what? I should clear the rest of the room. What are you talking about? And she was very bothered by the fact that I was cutting off the search right after she found the first hide, and that I was kind of taking over that control. And I could see kind of throughout the day that bothered her a little bit. And she found, I think the first 3 searches, she found the hides in about 5 seconds each. And then the last one took her forever. It took her like 45 seconds. And I think it may have been because each search got cut off at the first hide that she lost a little bit of that like enthusiasm and drive to just source the hide immediately that she normally has.
And that goes back to the other question we answered about single hides and dogs taking longer to find single hides.
Yeah.
So that could be.
It can be just a few repetitions that you can get these kind of behaviors, especially with certain dogs.
Yeah. So if your dog were really to get bored, what would that look like? That would look like a dog who wants a reinforcer, but starts looking for harder problems. That's what it would look like. They wouldn't stop working. Yeah, I've seen dogs.
They're like, that one's there, but where's the interesting hide?
Yeah.
Where's the one that's going to stretch my brain?
Or they find the hide and they keep hunting, Mm-hmm. That's what boredom would really look like to me. It would look like a dog who doesn't approach the start line as excited. but who still wants their reinforcer, right? So that's what boredom means, is that the reinforcer hasn't lost value, but somehow the dog doesn't want to do the activity.
Especially when this dog used to be quite good, and all of a sudden they're not.
Yeah.
We actually, one of our California students a year or so ago, her dog, who'd been doing NW3, really great German Shepherd, all of a sudden was just passing hides, and like he'd catch him and go off and do something else for a minute. And maybe he had gotten a little bored. And then we started, if he caught the hide and then chose to leave it, it would get picked up, but it wouldn't be there when he came back. And suddenly there was like the ante was upped, and he got back to work. Yeah. And it only took a couple weeks, and he was back to searching really well. Yeah. And we may have also kind of started to throw in some stuff that maybe challenged his brain a little bit more too.
And if you're worried about this, what can you do to remedy it? Well, one thing I would do is you provide your own challenges. So maybe make personal goals of, okay, the time limit's 3 minutes. I'm going to get done in 1.5. I'm going to push myself to make it more of a time challenge. Or I'm going to make my dog work handicapped somehow. So let's work on a 4-foot leash instead of what we normally do. Let's go off leash in an area that I wouldn't normally go off leash in. Let's move a little faster. I'm going to run through the search area and see if my dog can still hit it. Add a challenge yourself if you think your dog's starting to get bored, so that you can keep it interesting for both yourself and your dog.
Probably most of you have done our running drill at some point or another, but that can really keep things interesting where the dog goes, what? This is different.
I know people have done that.
How do I win this? Yeah.
And it really made a difference. The dog actually performed better than they normally do.
Yeah, well, I remember at our first showdown, Jordan with her Husky Belle decided she was going to run the search area because they had a very limited amount of time. And Jordan's very competitive, and her dog did beautifully with her running the search area. There are a lot of other dogs where they wouldn't have been able to think through something like that, but her Husky thought it was fantastic.
Yeah. So let us know if you want any clarifications. We're going to do the giveaway now. So, Natalie, you want to take the lead on the giveaway?
So we give away lots of T-shirts, so we're skipping that for a month. This month, it's a video review by me. So if you're interested in that, then just comment. What do we want to do? Hashtag video review.
Hashtag
Is that too long? Review. Is that too much of a typing contest?
Okay, the first one to type hashtag video review gets a free video review by Natalie. Go.
Yeah, and then you can just, whoever gets that, I'll have you just send that to me by email, or by Patreon Messenger would be fine too.
Okay.
Let's see if anyone has.
Remember that this record of all the questions and answers will be posted afterwards, so you can watch it whenever you want. You can go watch our previous episodes, and I hope you'll join us for our next episode.
Okay, so it really was a typing contest. Diane Schlesinger won this month. So
congratulations.
Thank you. And just send me the video that you want reviewed. I guess they can send it through Patreon, right? Through Patreon
It's
Messenger.
Up to you because they're sending it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, so if it's easiest for you, just send it through Patreon Messenger. Otherwise, email it to readysitgo.natalie@gmail.com.
Another typing challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you guys for another great episode of NAMA. I'm looking forward to seeing next month. Remember, start sending me your questions for next month's NAMA as soon as you can.
Yeah, and whenever you guys think of them, don't let yourselves forget what they were. Just send them over, and we keep a list so that we have them ready at the end of the month.
Yeah, and they can go same through Patreon Messenger or to our email addresses. Or if you know us on Facebook, send it to us on Facebook. We'll answer it here.
And let me look at the calendar so I can tell you guys when next month is going to be. And Wednesday seems to be working well.
Yeah, I like it.
If any of you really disagree with that, let us know. But I think it's better than Fridays. Fridays tend to have different things.
Seems like the next one is going to be June 26th.
The day before our anniversary.
Well, it's a good thing she reminded me. So maybe we'll make an extra special wedding anniversary Nosework Patreon.
Sure.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So as always, thank you.
Thanks
to our supporters on Patreon for making this possible. We're having a blast putting all of our resources online for you guys, and we hope to see you next time.
And let us know what you want to see, as always.
Yeah, as always.